Hello, today I made a very huge apple pie from scratch. This pie is absolutely gorgeous and delicious. To make it, you will start with 2 sticks of cold butter, should be unsalted. Go ahead and slice the butter very thinly. Make sure it's cold like from the fridge and then set it aside. Now measure 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour and 2 tablespoons of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1 teaspoon of baking powder. This is the secret ingredients for the perfect crust. But if you don't trust baking powder, leave it out. Whisk those together and then add in the butter. Now use your hands to just mix the butter into the flour, but do not knead it. Do not rub the butter onto the flour. You do not want it to mix too much with the flour at this point. Just separate it so that all the pieces that are clamped together are separate and swimming around in the flour. Then you're gonna need ice cold water. I have all the ingredients in the description box with their measurements. Add in your ice cold water a little at a time and using a fork, mix it into the flour. You do not want to use your hands at this point because you could melt the butter and that's going to interfere with the texture of the crust. You'll use about half a cup of water altogether. It must be ice cold. Otherwise, the butter will start to melt prematurely. When your dough is wet like so, go ahead and just transfer it to a wide surface where you're going to shape it into a ball. I just transfer it like so, and it should be firm, so do not use too much water. This is good, and the butter will soften up a little and it's gonna help the dough to hold together. So press it like so. Do not really knead, but it's like you're pressing, and when you're doing this, you're also forming layers in the dough, which is going to make the crust very flaky and really good looking. So press it together until it's holding together. The butter will melt a little bit or will soften a little bit, that's okay. But you do not want to let it soften too much because this dough will turn really sticky and really soft. Once it is holding together like so, just sprinkle some flour again and divide it into 2 pieces because you want you want the bottom layer and then the top crust. So as you divide it, you could make it equal, or you could make one piece just slightly bigger. Go ahead and shape them into discs because later you'll be rolling them out. So just like that for both pieces. And then you will use aluminum foil. No, not aluminum foil. You'll use your cling wrap to wrap them up and put them in the fridge for about 30 minutes to 1 hour to let the dough kind of relax and get into a better texture before you roll it out. Yeah, so sprinkle flour so that it's not too sticky and then wrap it up with your cling wrap and place them in the fridge. You cannot use it right away. You need it to relax a little before you can use it so that the dough is just right that way. Now let's prepare the apple filling. I'm using 6 Granny Smith apples. They are quite large. This is a really huge pie. So depending on the size of pie you're making, you might need to just reduce the number of apples. To prepare my apples, I cut them into quarters and then I core them just manually with a knife. And you could use an apple cutter or any other way that you prefer, as long as your pieces, in the end, your pieces should be small enough to fit into an apple pie neatly. Some people like to cut their apple pieces longitudinally, like lengthy shapes, long and thin shapes. I like mine to be cubes. So that's absolutely up to you. Now go ahead and cut each piece into 3 long pieces and then again cut it twice again. Just make the shapes that would cook nicely within the pie. So if the pieces are too large, they are not going to cook. Most likely they'll come out crunchy. And if they are too small, they might pack up too much and that's not good either. So, but this is just how I prepare my apple pie filling. So I did this for with all of the apples and then just place them in a large bowl, and yeah, Now we'll move on to cook it up a little. Again, this step, people do it differently, but this is my way of doing it. I go ahead and place the apples on a pot, add brown sugar, add cinnamon, and a little bit of salt, and then just cook the apples until they begin to release their juices. Would be on medium high heat. At this point, the apples are releasing their juices, so I will go ahead and add my thickener, which is cornstarch, 2 tablespoons of cornstarch with quarter cup of water. Just add that in and mix it nicely. It's gonna thicken, and when you transfer, of course, you're gonna let it cool fully before we add it to the pie. But it thickens so that it's not gonna flow out of the pie or get the pie soggy. Now the last step here is to add butter onto the pie filling because it's gonna add some creaminess to it, and the cornstarch alone brings in a bit of thickness or gumminess, but then the butter loosens it up and adds a creamy texture, a creamy look to the apple pie filling. Looks good. It's ready to go. So just let it cool fully before adding it to the pie. Now it's been 1 hour since the dough has been resting in the fridge. Although 30 minutes is also okay, go ahead and roll out the bottom layer of the pie crust. So you need a lot of flour because otherwise it's going to get sticky, because well, when it comes out of the fridge, this dough is firm because the batter is hardened. However, if your kitchen is warm, it will start to warm up immediately and soften, and when the batter softens, it becomes super sticky. So that's why I'm using a lot of flour to prevent any sticking. So roll it up on the rolling pin like that, and then roll it back out to lay it neatly on the baking tray. This is a very huge baking tray. I cannot say the inches. I didn't remember those offhand, but it's a huge tray. I mean, it's taking 6 large apples to fill this tray. Um, but I don't mind it. I eat a lot of apple pie. I don't make it every day, but when I make it, I eat a lot. So yeah, we finished all this pie. So when the apples are fully cooled, go ahead and add the apple filling into the pie. Make sure it's nicely full, because if it's not full, there's gonna be a depression. But if you overfill it, then it's gonna overflow. So just fill it nicely. And if your kitchen is too warm, place that in the fridge so that the dough does not soften too much. Now roll out the top layer of the crust and keep it as thin just like the previous one. Again, keep it well dusted with flour so that it's not sticky. Roll it up the same way like we did with the bottom crust, and then you're going to lay this on the top side of the pie. Go ahead and lay it back onto it like that. And it's not really difficult as long as your dough is well dusted. Now trim off the edges, but don't trim too much because you want that edge of the pie to be nicely thick and a bit raised. Otherwise, there's gonna be overflow of juices as the pie filling begins to bubble inside. So you wanna keep a nice crust on the outside. I just pressed it together here to kind of seal those edges, the top and the bottom layers, stick them together. And then I folded them in like so because we want to form a nice edge to the pie. So fold it in all round, just neatly like so. And then we are going to crimp up the pie so that it looks more beautiful. Yeah. Okay, that's the first step done. Now the second step is to crimp the pie, and to do this I'll just use my fingers, and make sure you use the flour. Like I have some flour on the corner there so that I dip my fingers on the flour, because otherwise the dough could stick on my fingers. Just go ahead and add those patterns to your pie. It's gonna look really beautiful in the end. And um, Just do so all round and should be good. All right. So now that that is done, just press it down a little bit, because if it's raised too much, it's gonna brown too quickly before the rest of the pie is browned. And by the time the rest of the pie is browned, this is burning. Now egg wash is the next step. Egg wash is just 1 egg and 2 tablespoons of milk. Go ahead and beat those nicely, and then using a brush, apply the egg wash all over the pie. You can't bake your pie without egg wash because it's not going to brown nicely. So make sure to apply onto the edges as well, especially those on the crimped area, because it's very easy to, if you forget those parts, then it's not gonna brown evenly. Our pie is almost ready to go into the oven. So sprinkle some granulated sugar. Again, it's gonna make the texture be so awesome. The overall look of the pie. So maybe 4 pinches of granulated sugar. And the last step is to make perforations on the pie so that it can breathe as it cooks. And it's just important. Otherwise, your pie is probably gonna blow up. Okay, so you can cut as many or as little, as few perforations as you want. I just made 5, which feels like the right number here. And make it cute, because it's gonna add to the final look of the pie. That's ready. So now the pie is ready to go into the oven. You're gonna bake it at 375 F for a whole hour. But remember, this is a very huge pie. If your pie is smaller, you might need to bake for fewer minutes. Please do check out my books on Amazon. I do have lots of books and I would appreciate your support. Now the pie is ready. It's fully done. It's well browned. I did tent it at some point because it was browning too quickly. So just use aluminum foil to tent the pie. Let that pie cool for as many as 12 hours. But if you're not patient, maybe 6 hours. The pie is fully cooled here, so now I am cutting it so we can see the inside. So this one cooled down for probably 5 to 6 hours, and yeah, it's a little bit runny on the inside, but it's sticking together. And then I like my pie warm, so I did warm it up again before eating it, just because I like it to be warm. Look at that crust. It's very soft. It's very flaky. Yeah, let me show you the flakiness. You see? So this is because of the baking powder. If you don't want to use baking powder, that's fine. But I'm telling you, baking powder is really a game changer in making pie crust. So we are coming to the end of this video now. The pie is ready. We enjoyed it. I hope that you try this recipe too and that you enjoy it. I will also be posting more pies. I have a cherry pie coming up, and I'll see you in another video. Thank you. Bye bye.